Welcome to my 272nd video on my work with OO gauge. This video will feature a Tri-ang R52 model of an LMS-3F Jinty tank engine converted for 3-rail running, by someone else, not by me. I bought this one on eBay already converted. The video will follow my normal format, a bit of background history, a look at the new model with some necessary servicing and repair, and some running video on my Hornby Dublo 3-rail tabletop. It's probably a bit superfluous for me to go on a lot about the history of the Jinty, since there's scarcely a better-known class of small British steam engine. These engines were absolute workhorses, and they were found all over the rails in Britain for decades. The class was very much in the Midland Railways tradition, designed by Sir Henry Fowler and first produced in 1924, just after amalgamation folded the Midland into the LMS. The Jinty design was based on rebuilds of the Midland 2441 class, which was introduced in 1899 by Samuel Waite Johnson. The LMS built 422 Jintys between 1924 and 1931. They were originally numbered by the LMS in the 16,000s. In 1934, the LMS renumbered the Jintys in the 7,000s. Almost all of them passed into BR service upon nationalisation in 1948, and BR added 40,000 to the running numbers. They were withdrawn between 1959 and 1967, with 9 remaining in preservation. The LMS rated the Jintys 3F, classing them essentially as medium-strength freight engines. However, they served in many capacities, pulling local passenger services and shunting as well as hauling freight. Here's my model on the bench for a first inspection. The running number of 7428 would make this a Jinty built for the LMS by Hunslet in 1926, initially numbered 16511, renumbered 7428 in 1934, and renumbered 47428 upon nationalisation in 1948, and finally withdrawn in 1965. I did convert an OO gauge Jinty for 3-rail running myself, but I based my conversion on a later Hornby version, as the large drive gear protruding through the base of the chassis made fitting centre-rail pickups to the Tri-ang R52 difficult. There's no room either in front of or behind the drive gear for a full Dublo centre-rail pickup assembly. Whoever converted this one was ingenious in a number of ways. They got around the centre-rail pickup issue by fitting a Dublo pickup frame at the back with only one of its pickups, and then fitting another pickup at the front. Not sure where that one came from, though I know I've seen pickups like that before, perhaps on Trix models or Marklin. Both body and chassis had Tri-ang markings, so there's no doubt that this model was based on a Tri-ang R52. Here's my new 3-rail conversion on the left, together with an original Tri-ang R52 on the right. The R52 was amongst the first models introduced to Tri-ang railways after the Lines brothers took over Rovex and started making model trains. The R52 first appeared in 1955, well before Tri-ang's takeover of Hornby in 1964. Here are those two models from the bottom. Here's a close-up of the back of both models. My original Tri-ang R52 on the right has the earlier style of Tri-ang tension lock couplings, with the hook and bar of the coupling pivoted in a vertical slot protruding from the end of the chassis. The 3-rail conversion was clearly based on a slightly later version of the R52, as it has the later style of coupling attachment with a horizontal bar with pins on either end. Whoever did the 3-rail conversion has fitted metal simplex couplings, presumably because they were intending to run this engine with Dublo rolling stock or similar. Here you can see the front of both models from the top. The original R52 uses a screw in the chimney to attach the chassis to the body. That screw was not present in my 3-rail model. I tried the model with my bench power supply. I could get the motor to operate with power to the front centre rail pickup, however I got nothing with power applied to the rear centre rail pickup as seen here. There was a wire running back from the front centre rail pickup, soldered as seen here to the side of the rear centre rail pickup assembly. Another wire was assembled into that mess, and that wire ran up to a brush connector. Apparently contact was not actually being made between that soldered blodge and the rear pickup assembly. I looked underneath for screws wishing to disassemble the model. There was a screw at the front holding on the front coupling, and I thought that might also be holding on the body. At the rear there was a screw holding on the pickup assembly. The rear coupling was held on by a nut. The way that the simplex couplings were fitted wasn't really very satisfactory. If the screw and nut were tightened fully, the coupling would be unable to pivot, so not allowing auto-coupling and perhaps causing issues on curves. To get the coupling to pivot, the screw had to be left slightly loose, but this would mean that the screw might work looser during running, leading to the coupling dropping right off. This problem was avoided on Dublo models, as the simplex couplings were held in place by rivets, allowing the coupling to pivot, but with no possibility of working loose and falling off. The simplex couplings on this model have also been bent sharply upwards, as the mounting points on the chassis were too low to bring the couplings to the correct height without this bending. I undid the screw at the front. This allowed me to remove the front coupling, but did nothing regarding the attachment of body and chassis. I definitely wanted to get the body off, as apart from wanting to service the motor, there seemed to be one or more large, heavy weights rattling around and shifting inside the body. I noticed this rather unusual screw on the side of the body. I undid that screw. With that screw removed, I was able to lift the front of the body up from the chassis, and then the chassis could be pulled forward, unhooking the tabs at the back from the holes in the body, and so separating body and chassis. Two large lead weights just fell out, apparently attached to nothing. Perhaps they were originally glued and the glue failed. The chassis was marked Tri-ang X392, built in Britain. There were yet more lead weights, a loose one at the front and a small one sort of jammed above the worm. Someone certainly wanted to make sure this model was very heavy. I used a multimeter to test for continuity. There was no continuity between the front and back centre rail pickups. Further specifically, there was no continuity between the soldered blob and the rear centre rail pickup assembly. I decided to try to resolder the wires to the rear centre rail pickup assembly rather than completely redoing the wiring more radically, which was certainly a possibility. I applied Model Master flux to the blob and the pickup frame in hopes this would assist with getting solder to stick well. Then I soldered the blob to the frame using standard electrical solder, which appeared to take okay. I tested continuity again. Now there was continuity between front and rear centre rail pickups. I tested with power applied to the rear centre rail pickup and to the wheels. This now operated the motor okay. The motor worked with power applied to any wheel, which raised an interesting question. How was this model managing to get power from the wheels on both sides to connect to the chassis frame? Here's a standard R52 from the bottom. The wheels on one side, at bottom here, are not insulated from the axles at all, so power passes through these wheels, through the axles, and into the chassis frame. The wheels on the other side, at top here, are insulated from their axles by plastic bushings, and wiper pickups, seen clearly here, pick up power from those wheels, which is then passed by a wire to the brush on the insulated arm of the brush retaining spring. The wiper pickups are attached to that fiberboard plate at the bottom of the chassis. On my 3-rail conversion, the fiberboard plate and the wiper pickups have been completely removed. So how is power now getting from those wheels to the chassis frame? Well, the answer is that a little spring in a tube, I think, has been fitted somehow to the front of the chassis, and that spring is pressing against the inside of the front driving wheel. This was apparently all that was done to provide pickup from that side, but it seems to work fine. The motor will work with power applied to any of the wheels on the side, so I assume that power is being passed from the back driving wheels to the front driving wheel via the conrods. A bit iffy, but it seems to work. I cleaned the wheels with a bronze brush in a rotary tool. They were quite dirty, and the last thing I want to do is put more dirt onto my tracks. I unclipped the brush retaining spring and removed the brushes. The wire from the centre rail pickups is soldered to the contact tucked in with the near side brush. For some reason there is the cut-off end of another wire attached to that contact, perhaps the remnant of the wire from the wiper pickups. The commutator was fairly dirty. I cleaned the commutator with some T-cut, and I also cleaned the brushes and contacts with electrical contact cleaner. I refitted the brushes, which I always find very fiddly to do with XO4 motors. It's just awkward to get hold of the brushes and feed them through those little slots and get the spring to hold them in place before they fall out again, but the hardest part's actually getting them through the slots. Then I oiled the axles and the motion, and I tried the power again. I applied some gear oil and white grease to the worm and the drive gear. I put a little oil into the front and back oil reservoirs of the motor, but they seemed to already be quite wet with oil. I wasn't too keen on trying to refit these large, awkward lead weights into the body. It didn't appear that they would be easy to fit without impeding the fit of the chassis. I got out some self-adhesive weights instead. These were quite low profile, each weighing 1/4 ounce. I stuck 4 of these weights into the body, 2 on each side. I felt that this would bring the model up to a perfectly good weight without any issue of fouling the chassis. I refitted the body to the chassis, refitting the screw on the side. I refitted the front coupling. As mentioned, this was a bit of an issue, as if the screw was tightened all the way, the coupling wouldn't pivot. I tried the power again. Everything was still working okay, and now things ran more quietly and evenly and with less power. Running was quite balky when I first tried this model. I got the model onto my 003 rail tracks for some running. Okay, so let me try to show this 3-rail converted Jinty running if I can. Let's see what we're doing here. There we go. Whoops, sorry. Camera work here. Runs pretty decently, except that it has a problem getting over this end point here. Well, I meant to turn it up there to help it get over the point, and I actually absent-mindedly turned it down rather than up, so that didn't help. Because of that one, well, it maybe hesitates a bit. Short wheelbase engines really struggle to get over points. I gave it more power that time. Short wheelbase, it's just a bit of a problem getting short wheelbase trains over, short wheelbase engines over points. The things that with more spread out pickups, oh, now he's, I was going to say he's never stopped on that point, but then he did. They don't, this point is very rarely a problem actually, it's usually the one at the other end that's a problem. Okay, well, let me see if I can try and hook up some wagons to it. I've actually got some wagons. Famous last words. I've got some wagons back here on the reversing loop, but I don't, it's just too difficult to do holding a camera and things, so I'm afraid I'm going to have to turn the camera off while I couple up, I think. Well, I've got it coupled up to the wagons, and I'm none too sure that everything is railed properly, so it may or may not work, but we can try. Okay, you know what, I'm going to, before I try and go round, I'm going to change this point, because if I go round and forget to change that point, we're obviously just going to derail when we hit that point. And we got over that, point. It's a struggle getting over that point because you know, we just struggle to maintain contact over it, and we'll get a bit more here as well. So anyway, I think you could say basically that's running quite decently. Because I converted a Jinty myself, but that'll do for now, won't it, I think. It's not running too badly, really. Bit of a struggle getting over points because of the short contacts, but